Season 9 may not come with a new hero, but the changes we're about to see look even more impactful. It's looking like Overwatch 3 already, considering this patch has massive overhauls for health pools and projectile sizes. And on top of that, every hero now has a healing passive, ultimate charge cost is up 10% for everyone, and there's still a lot more. So let's break it down so it all makes sense. Make sure to use the link in the description below for a GameLeap membership if you want to polish up your supports for this season. With all the courses and guides, you can master your favorite heroes and roles with content from a wide variety of experts and coaches. Make sure to check it out and enjoy the video. Firstly, every hero is getting health buffs. Tanks have 75 to 100 more health and armor, while the rest of the cast gets 50, with only a few outliers like Tracer and Widow getting only 25 extra health. This very obviously changes the game in a crazy way. Everybody is way more tanky. In any other patch, Tracer getting an extra 25 HP would make her busted, but everyone else around her is getting the same treatment at the same time. Still, some heroes are getting better treatment than others. Diva, Orisa, and Wrecking Ball are getting the most extra armor this patch at 75. Mauga and Roadhog might be getting 100 extra base health, but 75 armor is actually a little bit better. With 30% damage reduction, that armor can tank just about 107 damage until it breaks. Winston and Reinhardt are also getting their own little armor slice. 50 armor and 25 HP for Winston, and 25 armor and 50 HP for Reinhardt. It's a lot simpler for DPS, because almost everyone is getting a flat 50 bonus health, except Tracer and Widow's 25 that I mentioned earlier. And for the supports, everyone except for Zenyatta is now at 250 health. He's the only one at 275. Lifeweaver also had 225 health before this patch, but he's not keeping that advantage like Zen is. He's just like the rest of the supports now, but he still has shield health, which is better than nothing. But Season 9 doesn't just bring health buffs to everybody, that would just make everybody way harder to kill and slow the game down massively. So we're also getting projectile and bullet size buffs almost entirely across the board. Putting it simply, most weapons now shoot bigger shots. And of course, just like with the health changes, some heroes are getting bigger shots than others. The biggest buffs go to the slowest projectiles, like Pharah's rockets and Junkrat's grenades. They get an extra 0.15 meters radius, and that's almost double the size they used to be. It's definitely gonna feel like it. Other faster projectiles like Mei's icicles or Hanzo's arrows get an extra 0.1, which is still a pretty hefty bonus. For Mei, it's again almost double the size it used to be, and for Hanzo, it's actually doubled. Hitscan weapons are of course buffed as well. For lower fire rates like Cassidy and Ashe, they get a lighter buff of 0.08 extra meters, but high fire rate hitscan weapons like Soldiers, Tracers, or even Wrecking Balls only get 0.05. It makes sense, being one of the most consistent forms of damage. The other more unique forms of damage like beam damage or shotgun projectiles get an extra 0.05 as well. That's Echo's focusing beam, Doomfist's hand cannon, and even Ramatha's primary fire. It was already recently buffed anyway, and it's made him noticeably better. There are a few projectiles that aren't being buffed, mostly ones that are already big enough like Ryan Firestrike and Sigma Rock, but also other skill shots that are supposed to be tough to hit, like Sleep Dart, Whip Shot, and Hook. The game feels completely new, and even newer still is one of the most polarizing changes they've ever added. Automatic health regen for everyone, not just supports. Tanks and DPS now self-heal for 20 per second after not taking damage for 5 seconds, while for supports it activates in half the time. They actually did it, gave everybody regen. Again, this helps some heroes more than others. Out of the tanks, Wrecking Ball clearly gets the biggest use of the passive, but Mauga and Orisa in the front line won't be activating it nearly as much. For Tracer and Soldier, it's perfect for flanking for way longer, while Bastion doesn't really need the extra regen while he's surrounded by his team. It's a big step to give this passive to everyone, and it also means giving supports a stronger regen. Last patch, it was at 15 per second that started after 2 seconds, and now it's back to 20. It used to be so strong that it got nerfed, so hopefully the extra half second it takes to kick in balances it out. You'll still be able to chase people down to confirm kills, but on longer chases on game modes like Flashpoint or Push, you're gonna have to respect the regen. When it actually kicks in, it's pretty effective. But obviously, any point of damage stops the healing, and the DPS passive has been changed again. No more faster reload on kill. Instead, every DPS now applies a 20% healing reduction effect for 2 seconds after dealing any hero damage. To me, that's a crazier change than the regen passive, since we're playing a game where players are always taking poke damage anyway, and now they have even more health to feed even more. Applying this heal reduction is going to be super easy, and it's probably going to give DPS way more carrying potential with their focus fire, although you can just as easily solo backline as Tracer without joining voice chat. And for the last global change, everybody's ultimate now costs 10% more. You'll need to deal and heal damage more per ultimate, but naturally, everybody will be doing more damage with projectile and bullet size buffs, and support ultimates charge too fast anyway. And now for the specific hero changes, starting with the tanks. Diva's self-destruct is still one of the worst ultimates for playing aggressively, but it's at least getting a maintenance buff to keep it as lethal as it should be. The outer radius damage and the inner radius range have both been increased. That basically means it deals the 1000 maximum damage at a larger area, and also deals more damage than before to players who are 10 to 20 meters away from the blast. For Doomfist, his rocket punch does slightly more damage. A fully charged wall stun now does 115, up from 80. If you want to get mathematical, 80 damages 40% of 200 health, while 115 is 46% of 250, the new standard for squishies. So technically, you're more than keeping up with the health buffs when it comes to your rocket punch. Next is Junker Queen. Her ultimate used to deal 40 impact damage and 60 bleed, but now that bleeding damage has been buffed up to 90. Extra damage means Rampage doesn't suck into the new health pools, but it also means you'll be getting 60 extra healing per person hit for a total of 180. Insane numbers, but in this patch it's commonplace. Reinhardt and Winston are also getting buffs, but to their main damage output. After all, their primary fire damage doesn't benefit at all from the projectile buffs. First off, Ryan's hammer damage is being boosted from 85 to 100 per swing, the second time it's been buffed ever. It's a bit weird that his hammer now does the same damage as his fire strike. Cancelling your swing into fire strike doesn't increase your burst damage anymore, but it's obviously still great for further targets and cleaving players in a line. And of course, his charge is also being buffed. 225 isn't enough to kill squishy targets anymore, so it now deals 275 damage. Now for Winston, who predictably also needs damage buffs to keep up. His primary fire Tesla cannon now deals 75 damage per second, up from 60, and his primal punches are now 50 damage per hit instead of 40. He still dies really easily to the bigger bullets, but he can also farm really hard with his new damage and primal, so basically just the same as before. That's it for the tanks. The ones I didn't mention are hopefully strong enough with just their projectile and health buffs. Now it's on to DPS, starting with Ashe and Bob. He now deals more damage, going from 112 DPS to 136. Just another maintenance buff that makes sure that he can still kill most supports in DPS in 2 seconds if they don't get help. Cassidy is also getting an ultimate tune-up. Deadeye damage ramps up a bit faster. In the first 2 seconds, it now charges up 150 damage per second, up from 130, and after that, it now charges at 300, up from 260. It still won't be a good ultimate, but 300 DPS at the very end of the high noon can lead to some surprising picks. Next is Echo. Her duplicate now has a maximum of 350 HP instead of 300. It would be pretty awful to copy a tank and only get 50 extra health after all. Her focusing beam is also one of the few beam abilities in the game that does get its own 0.05 meter increase that I mentioned earlier. A lot of the best heroes this patch will be the ones that get the most value out of the bullet size buffs. Next is Genji. He doesn't get any shuriken damage buffs to help him break through the extra new health everyone has, but his Dragon Blade does slash faster. You can now slash every 0.7 seconds instead of 0.9, bringing the DPS from 122 to 157. That keeps his ultimate from being garbage in the new patch, but it also means that slash dash slash combos are faster, and 270 damage will still kill all the new 250 HP heroes. And on top of that, you'll get more total swings in the ultimate. Getting kills at the end of the duration is a lot more viable. Next is Hanzo, with Storm Arrows being buffed both in damage and cooldown. Storm Arrows now deal 75 damage, up from 65, and the cooldown between uses is now 8, down from 10. The cooldown change makes it a lot better to spam it out more for maximum damage output rather than saving it for long-range duels. So far, most of these changes have been about adjusting to the new HP everyone has, but now we're finally seeing the Pharah rework that's taken so long. Her rockets fly faster and more often, and she takes less damage from her own explosions. She's got a new ability called Jet Dash, similar to Lifeweaver's, a horizontal dash on a 10-second cooldown that also refills some fuel. This is massive for not being a floating sitting duck, and it makes her way more interactive to play with as well. She's looking strong, but not too broken. Her jump jets have predictably been nerfed. They're 20% weaker and have a longer cooldown. It's gone from 10 to 14 seconds, but it also refills 50% of your fuel, making for good synergy with both Jet Dash and her other mobility. She's looking to be a bit of a beast diver if you can get close to the backline fast enough. Her hover jets are way more maneuverable, and you can also move twice as fast as before, but the total fuel is decreased, and you can only recharge while on the ground. Sky High Pharah is pretty much dead. But now there's a new Pharah, and one with a lot of flexibility. You can make up for your longer cooldowns and lower resources by overcharging your fuel. You can use your jump jets or your jet dash to stock extra fuel up to 200% when you use the ability at full or close to full fuel. And when you're out of fuel, you can still slow your descent by holding your hover jets, but it's only really useful to avoid falling off the map because of the total fuel and jump jet nerfs. It's a pretty wild rework that will take a lot of time to fully understand, but at least she's more dynamic than before. That's it for the DPS. For the supports, we've got 5 changed heroes, starting with Brig, who's getting a simple damage upgrade to her flail, from 35 to 45 per hit. That takes her DPS up from being 58.333 repeating to a nice clean 75 DPS, just like Winston. And if you were sick of everybody getting straight buffs with no drawbacks, Kiriko's kunai size is being reduced by 0.03, putting it at the same size as Mei's secondary fire icicles. She's still getting a big advantage off the projectile buffs, just not astronomically higher than anybody else. And speaking of a big advantage, Lucio's boop is surprisingly way better. It deals 10 extra damage, now at 35, has a 12% higher knockback effect, and has an increased movement lockout duration. That lockout duration that you might not have heard before is the reason you can't counter-strafe Lucio boop. Now this patch, you're locked into that momentum for 0.45 seconds, up from the more unnoticeable 0.3. Lucio boop was already great for making plays, but it might become a lot more annoying and a lot more broken when the Lucio players start surging back. Mercy's also got a buff, but to her movement. When you cancel your Guardian Angel with jump or crouch, there's a short duration until your next cooldown starts. That used to be 1.5 seconds, and now it's only 1. Mercy players know exactly what I'm talking about, but for everyone else, it just means that she can fly around more often. Her passive has also been improved. Healing allies now heals you for 40% of the healing done, up from 25%. It probably won't help you survive if everyone's focusing you, but in the more messy fights, you can definitely extend your life a lot more by healing as you move to safer positions. And now finally, for the last hero change. Moira's main source of damage, her secondary fire, now deals 15 more DPS from 50 up to 65, and has a larger lock-on radius. Basically just the bullet size buffs in Moira form, since her grasp is a weird form of beam damage. It should keep her just in line with the rest of the game, so she's probably going to be just as strong as before. That's it for all the Season 9 balance changes explained. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.